Okay, good morning, everyone. Before we begin, I just have a few housekeeping issues. This is a hybrid meeting with both in-person and a virtual audience. I think we have quite a few people attending virtually. During the Q&A, the in-person audience will be allowed to ask their questions, but the virtual audience will have to submit their questions on Zoom. And we will read out the questions. My colleague Ingrid will read out the questions. The in-person audience will have to activate their microphones. So if you become familiar with your microphones, otherwise we won't be able to hear you, and the virtual audience will not be able to hear you. The session is being videotaped, so bear that in mind when you're asking your questions. Feel free to get refreshments. The refreshments are in the kitchen. And the restrooms are in the lobby here, okay? So, good morning, and thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us here today. I believe this session will be a very strategically important session for faculty. One of the most important ones I think we're going to have this year. At CUNY, my role is to help you secure the resources necessary for your groundbreaking work. Candidly, we must acknowledge the current climate in the U.S. research. Funding is really under increasing pressure. And we're facing volatility, becoming intensely competitive. In many fields, there's flat or declining budgets, and we really face uncertain futures as researchers. But for academic institutions in the New York area, a challenge like this is one simply invites us to develop an ambitious and more global solution to the challenges at hand. We're just not looking for a backup plan. We're seeking a pathway to expand our footprint and diversify our funding portfolios to ensure the longevity and security of our research programs. So while U.S. funding faces caps and cuts, the EU is making a long-term strategic investment to attract, retain, and support the world's best scientific minds through a clear and growing commitment to basic research. The pathway runs directly through the European Union's flagship research and innovation program, Horizon Europe. It's not a modest grant scheme. It's one of the world's largest investments in research and innovation at 95.5 billion euros. This is over $100 billion. It's dedicated to solving global challenges and funding fundamental excellence in research. For many of our peer institutions, and indeed the most forward-thinking faculty, Horizon Europe is becoming a crucial pillar in their research advancement. And the best part is that American researchers are eligible for many of these opportunities, as you'll hear from our presenter. Now, what does this mean for U.S. researchers? It means getting funding for excellent research that you might not be able to. Horizon Europe is structured around excellence, specifically around the European Research Council programs and the Marie Curie programs you'll hear more about. They're globally competitive, and securing one of these grants confers international prestige. It also means access to global scale research. Through collaborative clusters, you can integrate into a vast European consortia to tackle global issues from climate change to health, access unique data sets, tap into complementary expertise, and use state-of-the-art facilities that would be out of reach for you. It's a collaboration really of an unparalleled scale. It also means funding stability. In a time of domestic uncertainty, the EU represents a reliable, long-term commitment to science that can buffer you against the volatility of the US budget cycle. And as we've experienced recently, this volatility is becoming even more volatile. So the message is clear. If you're serious about conducting world-class, globally relevant, high-impact research, you cannot afford to ignore Horizon Europe. So we have someone here to guide us through this complex and rewarding landscape. We're privileged to host a distinguished guest, Dr. Florent Bernard, who I had the privilege of meeting, I believe, at a meeting in Seattle about 4 years ago. I maintained contact with him over the years. He's been a valuable resource to us here at CUNY. He is the Counselor for Research and Innovation at the EU delegation in Washington, D.C. Prior to his current posting in the U.S., he was an international relations officer for China at the European Commission's Director General for Research and Innovation in Brussels. He also held the position of an international relations officer for India and scientific officer. He holds a PhD in molecular biology from the Free University of Brussels, Belgium. He studied at the US at the University of Georgia. In fact, Georgia has even conferred honorary citizen, conferred him honorary citizenship status. He's conducted his postdoctoral research in Barcelona, Spain, before the European Commission. As you can see, this is a guy who's been around the block and knows a lot about research internationally. But he's a key link for, as U.S. Researchers, for us in the entire, to the entire European research system. And he's going to help us demystify the application process, which could be a little difficult at times, but not any more difficult than some of our programs. So please join me in offering a warm welcome to Dr. Bernard.
Thank you very much, John. I hope you can hear me like this if I speak. Yeah. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thanks for the nice introduction, John. Thanks for inviting me here. It's a great pleasure, great honor, always a great thing to be in New York City. This is Europeans' favorite city in the US, maybe because we just come here for a few days and then we go back home. But it's really a great pleasure to be here. I hope I will make your time worthwhile. So was all good, yes? Oh yeah, that would be good, yeah. Perfect. Thank you. So, and then so I'm just figuring out how all this works. Yeah.
Let's do this.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, this is all right. So it's been an interesting week for us, for Europe, with all the declaration at the United Nations. So that's why I'm here this week in New York. And you've probably heard, but in May, the EU has launched a new campaign called Choose Europe for Science, aiming at offering opportunities for global researchers throughout the world to continue their research in Europe. So we have indeed, as John said, a long-standing commitment for research. We consider fundamental research as a global good, and what we want to avoid is that a new generation of researchers would be wasted because of cuts in some part of the world. So that's why we are opening all our programs for researchers from all around the world, and bearing in mind that if they come to Europe, they may move to another horizon later on. But the importance is to make sure that researchers are trained and they don't move away from their scientific career. So I'm going to introduce you a bit of Horizon Europe. I don't know if anyone has heard about it or know a little bit. Can you raise your hand if you? Okay, so you have some basic knowledge about it. So Horizon Europe is the framework program that will last until 27, and we are already working on the next framework program. It's going to be Horizon Europe 28-34, and our ambition is to raise the budget up to 175 billion euro for 7 years. This one, the current one, is 100 billion euros for 7 years. But we have all realized in the EU that investment in research and innovation is key to the competitiveness. So Horizon Europe has started as a purely European program. The aim was to make sure that researchers across the 27 member states would work together instead of duplicating their efforts, and making sure that we could pool resources in terms of research. But soon enough, of course, our leaders realized that research is a global effort, and therefore we open the program to anyone around the world. And you see on this map, it's a snapshot of a screenshot of a dynamic map which shows where our partners are, where are the beneficiaries or the participant of Horizon Europe are. If you zoom in on this dynamic map, all these little dots will scattered. But as you can see, we have partners all around the world. There are currently around 150 countries participating in the program of Horizon Europe. The reason is that we have greatly facilitated the participation of many countries. For instance, we are funding researchers from all low and middle income countries. So all researchers from regions such as Africa, Latin America, or Southeast Asia are receiving funds from the EU to be part in those consortium that we're funding. Because it's a European program, we are mainly funding consortia. We have some single PI grants also. I will come to that. You probably have heard about them, like the European Research Council, but the bulk of the money goes into funding consortium. So we make sure that researchers from all over the world collaborate through those consortium. In addition to funding low and middle income countries, a number, or actually around 20 countries have associated to the program. This means that their government has paid a fee to join the program, and the researchers from those countries are treated like any other European researchers, so they can apply together with European peers and benefit from the funds. Those countries are typically those around the EU, like Norway, the UK, of course, Switzerland, Ukraine has also been associated, Iceland, etc. But as a new feature, we've also started associating major R&I players from far away from Europe. We started with New Zealand. So New Zealand is part of Horizon Europe. Last year, Canada joined also. And we are in, and we're bringing South Korea also in the program. And we're still in talk with Japan, and Australia just signify its interest to join. So this means that we have become the platform for researchers to collaborate together. Okay, so it's not the funds that you are used to here, like NSF, DOE, etc., where you would get funding as a single PI. This instrument, Horizon Europe, is really to have researchers collaborate together. For the US, it's a bit of a particular situation. We normally do not fund US researchers because they have not, the US government has not paid a fee to join Horizon Europe. We've offered that on many instances, but it has always been a no. So we normally don't fund, but there are exceptions to that. And I will come to that. So just spoiler alert, don't leave the room. There are still funding opportunities. But there are, of course, less than what associated country would get. It is important also, and you will see, I will give you some examples. It's important to know that being part of a consortium is extremely valuable. You are used to single PI grants, and then you call your partners to see what they are doing. When you have a consortium, it means that before starting the work, you agree with the other partners what each of them will do, and that will benefit your research. So we realize that a lot of consortium are much more competitive than a single PI because they are going forward together in a very complementary way. And this allows also for a lot of multidisciplinary research, which is much more difficult to get if you are just getting a single PI grant. To the extent that NSF is now funding some of these similar grants, but a very reduced number with the Global Center. You've probably heard about the Global Center from NSF. But in our case, we have hundreds and hundreds of consortium that are being funded. And just to clarify, there are a number of projects also happening in the US. We have currently, I think, 400 Marie Skłodowska-Curie fellow visiting US universities. Many of them are in CUNY, I believe. And also there are 400 projects taking place now between Europe and the US through Horizon Europe. Let's see the case of CUNY. So this is just to show you in a very visual way. This is, again, those are dynamic map. I'll share with you where you can find those. These just give you a clear view of the benefit of Horizon Europe. Look at how reaching out to Europe you are able to do when you're participating in the program. It allows you to have partners throughout the continent and across the world. You see there are some arrows that targets towards Africa, probably Southeast Asia also, India, and Latin America. So it's really, I just want to show you the advantage of being a part of those programs. So to give you a sense of what we are funding, here is some example of the type of research. This is, for example, a Marie Curie Fellow that is hosted at CUNY, working on the social science, work on ethnography in China. We have another one here, another Marie Curie Fellow on a wireless network for 6G, together with CUNY. And here we have a research project on nature-based therapies to improve mental health equity, again, involving a number of partners. And this is typically a consortium that is funded by us. And then a lot more projects that we have on a variety of areas. So on electron spin interaction, on liquid electrolytes, on philosophy, on scientists and UNESCO. So it's just to show you that these are very broad projects, and there is CUNY is already heavily involved in this program. So let me go through the structure of the program. So the program is it has 3 pillars. So I'm going to ask you to focus on the main square. So the pillar 1 is excellent science, pillar 2 the global challenges, and pillar 3 the innovation dimension. And we are funding excellent science through the pillar 1. The pillar 1 is typically of interest for US researchers, for the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Action, because that's where you can benefit from those grants by inviting European-based researchers to your university, and we will pay for that grant. So you can typically have a free postdoc grant at CUNY thanks to this program. The European, and I will come with more details in a bit. The European Research Council grants are also open to US researchers, but that's to relocate in Europe. But we have some flexibility. If you have a permanent position in a US university, you can work part-time. So half of the time can be retaining your position here in the US, and the other half working in the EU. Then we have pillar 2. This is typically the funding of the consortia. Those are top-down call for funding based on the global challenges. So you have on health, on social science, on security, on digital, AI and quantum, on climate, energy and mobility, and on food and agriculture. And those are predetermined topics aimed at creating consortium to resolve, contributing to the resolution of those global challenges. And then the pillar 3, it is mainly the European Innovation Council, which is a bit like USBIR. It's funding startups. Any innovators in the US can apply to that but they will have to relocate if they or open an office in the EU if they win the grant. So just to summarize, and I will come into detail, but just to have for you to clear. So without the participation of US researchers, you are welcome to join any of these programs. It's open to you to all of them if you are not asking for funding. And I know that in some case, if you win an NSF grant or DOE grant, you will not necessarily need the funding, but you can still join to tap into the potential and the knowledge of European peers. If you are requesting funding, you will have three different options that we will detail now: the ERC Synergy Grant, the Marie Sklodowska-Curie postdoc fellowship, and the health cluster of Pillar 2 I just informed. So that's just to give you a clear understanding where the opportunities are. For all, I have to add also that for all calls, if your participation as US partner is deemed essential to the project by the individual expert evaluator, then there is an option also for funding. Those are typically the case where the US partner would bring a special knowledge that we don't have in Europe, a special capacity, a special infrastructure, a telescope, etc., or a special access to an environment that we don't have in Europe. So in those cases, it's up to the expert evaluator to decide. They will allow the grant of a US partner. Okay, so I just want to clarify that so there is no misunderstanding. So let's have a look at the European Research Council grant. So those are, we call them the crown jewel of EU grants. They are grants for fundamental and even blue sky research. So we want the researchers that apply to those grants to be very risk-oriented. And we have three different, they are offered depending on the seniority. So we have starting grants, 2 to 7 years after the PhD, and it's up to 1.5 million euro for 5 years. The consolidated grants are 7 to 12 years of experience after your PhD, up to 2 million for 5 years, and the advanced grant, at least 10 years and of experience and up to 2.5 million euro for 5 years. So those three grants are single PI grants. You can apply to them and together with a host in the EU and benefit from them. There is a top-up to those grants of 2 million euros if you come from outside the EU. So this is new. So you can reach, for an advanced grant, up to 5 million euro, $5 million grant for 5 years. And indeed, for those of you who have already their permanent position here, we are offering this flexibility of, if you win the grant, of keeping your position, working in your university here, and spending at least 50%, including field trips in the EU. So this is really to facilitate the work. We have a number of US researchers doing that already. We have a professor from Berkeley. I think it's on economy. She retained her group in Berkeley, and she has created her own group in La Sorbonne in France. So it's really working well. There are two, the starting grants and the conciliator grants. The call for those grants are open. The starting grants close 15th of October and the conciliator grants in January. So those are the two calls. We just closed the advanced grant. We have seen a rise of application from the US. So typically we receive 20 grants from the US per call, and those are senior researchers. This time we received 114. So that there is a higher demand. I didn't expect that because those are established researchers, so less inclined to move, of course. But we were very surprised with this number. So we expect even more for starting grants and consolidated grants. And again, our objective is to make sure that researchers don't step out of their career. When they grant finish, they can go anywhere they want, or even before. The important is that we don't lose any talent because fundamental research is a global. Then the part that might be also of interest for you are the synergy grant. Those are small network of 4 partners at most, one of which could be from outside the EU. and that partner will receive funds also for the grant. So this is a grant funding opportunity for you, and the call is currently open also for synergy grants. So typically the way to apply for that, and that's valid for all the programs we're offering, all the grants we're offering, just connect with European peers. You will need a European in any case, so just connect with them and let them guide you, and that's all. And they will take care of all the administrative burden. You just need to provide the information, of course, of what is planned. You need to meet with the partners to decide what you want to do. But in terms of administration, all the European universities have an EU grants office. They are well skilled to deal with that, so they will do it. Make sure that your own grant office is aware, because if you are receiving money from a foreign country, in some case, some states, some university, there are maybe some issues, but it looks like for the Marie-Claude grants, it's all good. But just make sure that you're in contact with your own office. And we have also some resources here. We have a contact point that can help you on these administrative issues also. Okay. So I wanted to also give you some screenshot of our website, because indeed, as John said, it can be daunting to apply for a new scheme. My belief is that grant application looks daunting if we're not used to them, because I've looked at the NSF website. It's daunting to me. It's really complex. So, but you're all used to that. So I just want to give you a snapshot of how our website looks like, just to always prime your mind that it's not that hard. So this is the website showing all the grants. So you can see the different grants. You can explore them. There is also a section for non-European researchers where you can be well informed of all the opportunities. And here, for example, the Synergy grants, there is explanation who can apply. So all the description is there. It's really clear cut. So let's move on to the Marie Sklodowska-Curie Action now. So those are mobility grants. And typically, those are for which you are most interested will be the postdoctoral fellowship. So you can recruit a postdoc here coming from Europe. So it's a 2-year postdoc grant. It's very simple application. Is the grantee that with your signature, with the signature of the host, will apply to the grant. We run the evaluation. We typically run the evaluation over September, October. This year's course just closed end of August. And again, we received 65% more applications. So we received 17,000 applications instead of 10,000 this year, showing that there is a high demand for those grants. So we have those grants goes 2 ways. So you can host a European-based researchers in the US, and you can send your postdoc to the EU also. This is open to anyone in the world, and we will pay for all of this. Our grants for European researchers going to the US, we typically send 100 researchers every year. So there are currently 400 active in the US. And this year, again, half of the application to go outside of Europe, half of them were to go to the US. So we're happy to see that European researchers still are interested to come here. That's a good sign. Part of Marie Sklodowska-Curie Action, we also have the doctoral network. Here, we're not providing funds from the US partner, but I've noticed through my travel in the US that a lot of universities are looking to internationalize their doctoral programs. And so that could be an easy way for you to do that. You could, if you have your bulk of grants, doctoral PhD grants, you could join one of these networks. And the typical activity of this network is that the PhD candidates that are part of this network benefit from the know-how of all the other members. So it's very nice when it's a multidisciplinary network, because you can enter this network and have access to the knowledge of the other partners. You can have some stay among those partners, so you can send your PhD from CUNY to Germany or Sweden for a month, for 6 months, so they are trained. You're organizing together training for the whole cohort of PhD, so it creates also a nice connection between the different PhD. I've managed those grants for several years, and they are really, really very nice. And it's amazing for a PhD candidate to be part of this network, because it's much more different than being alone on your desk, on your lab. You really create a cohort, and it's good for future collaboration. Actually, you're allowing them to know each other from early on in their work. So those are the two important grants under Marie Skłodowska-Curie. So remember, you may have free postdoc here. You can send your postdoc, we'll pay for that, and you could be part of a doctoral network. Again, just to show you how to, very easy website, how to apply for funding, quick application guide, and that's it. So let's move on now to the pillar 2. So the global challenge, the consortium type of grant, where again, we are not going to fund automatically your participation, with the exception of the health cluster. NIH funds through awards European in Europe. So as a reciprocal gentleman agreement, we are also funding US researchers in the US. So that's really the only exception we are making. And in that case, if you apply together with other European 4 consortium, you will get the funds. The health cluster, as I told you, are, so under pillar 2, the global challenge calls for funding are all top down. So we are deciding on which areas to fund, but the calls are really large, and we are covering a lot of different topics, ranging from, of course, the molecular basis of disease, that's for sure, but also we are also funding research areas linked to public health systems, the nexus between climate and health now, it's very important, social health determinants, AI and digital and health nexus, of course, and also we have a number of platforms, international platforms, where together with other funding bodies in the world, including NIH, we are funding research on rare disease and infectious disease. So it's very broad. I will show you in a moment how does the list of calls for funding looks like. It's a 500-page document, so there's a lot of details, and so you may find what is of your interest. If you don't, remember that this work program that we publish with the list of funding is every 2 years. So we need to choose which strategic topic to target every 2 years. If you don't find your area, it may be so that maybe it's already been funded in the past, or it's going to be funded in the next work program. So, but every 2 years, you have a list, and it's very easy to screen it with your keywords, and it's good because you can plan in advance. You have the dates for opening of the call for funding and their closure. Okay, so I'll show you in a minute, and then I'll invite you to screen your respective work program according to which area you work on. So for those who will not ask for funding, so that's valid for the rest of the clusters under the pillar 2 global challenges. We are not going to fund you automatically. We've made your participation very easy. So we don't ask you to sign anything. So there is, because we had a lot of issue with, of course, the grant department of US universities, like, you are not receiving money, why should we sign a contract with you? So we don't ask you to sign any grant agreement. We just ask the PI to have a associated partner status, which means that they just need to sign an agreement with one of the partner, confirming that they will do the work, that they are respecting basic ethical principle, and that they have agreed on IP should there be any issue. For all the consortium, we encourage, and it's up to them, all the partners to sign a consortium agreement where all the relations, the access to previous know-how, the IP are discussed and agreed, okay? And this is between the partners of the consortium. We don't intervene. We offer a model. It's called DESCA. We offer a model for such consortium agreement, but we don't intervene. And in case you are not asking for funding, we'll just need to make sure that you have committed to do the work with one of the partner, and the responsibility will be with that European partner. So we've made it very easy. So you can be associated partner in any of the grants, and that makes life very easy for your grant department, believe me. All right. So I'll just go briefly through the content of each of the cluster. Those are very broad general terms. You have to go, but it's just to guide you in which cluster you would find your interest. So cluster 1 we saw is the health. Cluster 2 is culture, creativity, including society. So that's where we have all the social science type of research, including research on democracy, rule of law, fundamental rights, but also all the more historical aspects like cultural heritage, and also socioeconomic aspects such as inclusion and growth. So this is typically all the social science and humanities. I passed cluster 3 because it's about security, and it's really more for not really for universities. I've not seen a lot of university being involved. So cluster 4 is all the digital industry and space. So all the keywords you can think of: manufacturing technology, emerging technology, quantum, AI, robotics, advanced materials, big data, circular industries, and space, including Earth observation. Okay, so those will be in cluster 4. Cluster 5 is our all-time favorite, climate, science, and solution. All the research on energy, so including supply systems and grids, energy transition for buildings, transport and mobility, and also smart cities, smart mobility, and energy storage. And cluster 6 is all the food and bioeconomy, natural resource, so all the environmental observation, biodiversity, and natural resource, agriculture, forestry, rural areas, bio-based innovation, all the bioeconomy, ocean. We have a great cooperation with NOAA through the All Atlantic Ocean Research Innovation Alliance that falls into that, food system, and circular economy. So very broad, and again, we are funding both monitoring, observation, understanding of molecular mechanism or system, to innovation and finding solutions. So we are covering really the two. So yes, so the work currently we're under the work program 2025. So we have published that in May. Because the program, I told you it's work program every 2 years, but because we're a 7-year program, one of the work programs has to be for 1 year. So this is 2025. We're already finalizing the work program for 26-27. That will be the last for this framework program. And this, so just to alert you, this should be published hopefully by the end of the year or early next year. So keep an eye on that. I will massively communicate about it when it's done and share with John and colleagues all the information. But that's where you will have all the details of the calls for proposal for the next 2 years. So you have time to plan ahead. Once this is published, you screen that document, you look at your keywords, you look which call could be of interest, you reach out to your European peers, and maybe it's in 26, maybe it's in 27, but you have time to create this connection. Don't underestimate the time necessary to create a consortium. Remember, it can be 10, 15 partners. It's a lot of organization, of course, but it's worthwhile the efforts. So here, just to also familiarize you with how the document look like. So this is a PDF document. It's the work program for 2025. And we have one work program per cluster. Okay, so here is the health cluster, and then you see the main page with each of the calls, which are detailed after in the body of the document. But it's just to give you an example. So we have calls on health and environment, the impact of pollution on the development and progression of brain disease and disorder. Then if you click on that, you will have a description of the scope, what is expected in that call, the amount that is available. Typically, a grant for 10, 15 partner is going to be 5 million euro for 4 years project. So that's so, and partners, depending on their role and the impact, will get 205 or 200 to 500,000 euro or even more, depending on their role in the project. So here's just to give you a taste of how the calls for funding look like and how the documents look like. So we have also, if you don't have partners in the EU, we've also facilitated a kind of a Tinder for researcher platform where you can find partners. So each of these call, if you take the code, so it would be Horizon HLTH 2025-03 stay HLTH, and you go on the platform, on the funding portal, and the information is there electronically. And we have a special button, Find Partners, where you can put your own information, saying that you are interested to collaborate for that specific call. So for each call, there is this Find Partner button. And you can see also who else has expressed an interest to collaborate for that call, and you can reach out to them, their details, information. So that's the funding and tenders portal. That's the part that could look a bit daunting, but so you just cut and paste the code of the call, and you go in the search button, and it will appear there, and you just scroll down, and you will find all these information. So you will find exactly the same information as the PDF, which is the legal document, with, in addition, this find partner. You have the information on the opening date, closing date, etc., so you can navigate that quite easily. So EU funding and tenders portal. Yeah, that's how it looks like, for example. And then I told you about the support. So we have a number of national contact points for Horizon Europe throughout Europe. So every member state and associated country to the program have trained, we have trained some of their officials to know everything about Horizon Europe. So typically, European universities would call those national contact points to have any details about a single call. I encourage you to contact those contact points in Europe, because they will be really well informed if you have a question on the topic, etc. If it's more question about legal and financial aspect for US universities grant office, then we have someone in DC, Claire Chen. She's part of Encura. You're familiar with Encura. And she has graciously accepted to act as national contact point. We are really thankful to her. She can be contacted, but only for the legal and financial aspect. So it's typically your grant office that will call her if there are any questions, because she has seen so many cases. She knows how to navigate this this landscape. We also have another support, which is Euraccess North America. So they have a newsletter. I really encourage you to sign up. It's for free. They don't send too many emails, but at least they will inform you when new calls are coming up or when there are webinars. Because we organized a lot of webinars to explain how to apply to ERC, how to apply to Marie Curie, how to apply to different clusters. We have info days for these clusters, European time, but those are recorded. If you have the patience, they last 3 hours or 4 hours, and they go in detail in each of the calls. So, but the information is out there. There are a lot on YouTube, so you can really find all this information. And don't hesitate to reach out to Euraccess North America. It's led by two colleagues, so Jackson Howard and Deria Boutique-Kanir. And they're both in DC, and they're also available for being participate in webinars, etc. But I encourage you to sign up for their newsletter. I told you in the beginning, we have this Choose Europe for Science campaign. So we have a dedicated website for that. This is really for, let's say, researchers that don't have opportunities anymore here and that you don't want to lose them for science. So we are grateful, of course, if you facilitate this information. Again, I've read the press. I think it's good in a way that we read in the press that Europe or foreign countries want to poach US researchers. I hope this will wake up your leaders and not to have cuts in your funding. But that's really not what we are up. It's not directed to the US, it's a global effort. And again, this is for fundamental research mainly. So, and those researchers are mobile. The important is they don't go out of their scientific careers. I think it's the American Association, this American Association for Scientists that said it was an act of generosity because we would take care of US researchers for a few years and they would be mobile and free to come back if they want to after that. So don't hesitate to spread the word if you know people who are in need. And then happy to link on LinkedIn. I put a lot of information there on a regular basis, so don't hesitate to liaise there and tag me. So I'll stop here. I think we have a bit of time for questions. Thank you very much.
Important distinction. All of these are options.
So, all right. So just make a distinction. So you can apply to all the grants as US researchers. For the single PI grants, the starting grants, consolidated grants, and advanced grants, there is a mandatory relocation to Europe to benefit from it with the flexibility of part-time, remaining part-time in the US. Okay, so, but you can apply to all of them. The synergy grants are little networks of 4 partners, and there you can stay here. It's for there is the possibility for one of the 4 PI to be from outside the US, the EU, and stay where they are. Of course, this is not to relocate in Europe. Yes, yeah. Yes. Yes, yeah. Yes, absolutely. So the starting consolidator and the advanced grants are, so there are substantial grants aiming at establishing your own group. So if you're a beneficiary, you will receive that amount. Typically, you also negotiate with the host because once you you win the grant, you're still mobile and you can still decide where you want to go within the EU or one of the associated country. And you can negotiate the conditions of the grant. A lot of universities are fighting for having those grants, so they will give you good conditions like a nice space or promise for tenure, et cetera, et cetera. So that's up to you to negotiate. But what's in the grant is that amount of money that will cover the recruitment of PhD, postdoc, use for your research, et cetera. And typically also, if you're ERC grantee, it's a stamp on your quality. So you will probably attract more grants that you apply to. But it is for you to create your own group and be independent and start your blue sky and risky research. That's the objective. Yeah.
Virtual audience, can you turn your microphone on?
Yeah, I was going to say also the flexibility is typically for advanced grants because that's where we expect the researchers, the professor to be established, well established. That's why we give this possibility. For the other starting grant, we typically it's a 7 years, 2 to 7 years PhD. After the PhD, you don't have a permanent position yet. You're still jumping from one grant to another. So just yes. Yeah. So if the call says in writing that that country X is eligible for funding, it is eligible for funding. So there, it's clear, it's a legal mention in the work program that if it's the case of the US or any other country, the eligibility for funding is confirmed by the fact that it's written in that document. There is no limit. It depends. So it depends on the consortium. There is an average for each of the call in the work program. There is an estimation of the expected amount for each grant. So, for example, let's say there is 15 million for a certain call for funding available, and it says in the work program we expect each consortium to ask for around 5 million. So that means there will be 3 consortium for that call. So that, but this is an average, and it's the independent expert that will decide what is financially sound. So you may ask more or less, but you need to justify the type of work you will do in order to justify. There is no limit there is no discrimination for the non-European partner in terms of funding limits. It is treated on the same level as the European if it's written in the call that it is eligible for funding. Now, there is a nuance also. There are calls where it says it's encouraged to have this and this country part of the consortium. If it doesn't say that it's eligible for funding, it is not eligible for funding, but it's just encouraged to have this participation. If it's a call with our partners from African countries, well, then we know that they're eligible for funding, so that doesn't need to be specified. But if it says we want a US part, I mean, it's an advantage to have a US partner, but it doesn't say the US is eligible for funding, you won't automatically get the fund. So
You're a US researcher?
yes. So we don't look at nationalities. So all programs are open to anyone in the world. What matters is where you are. So if you are a European citizen in the US for 20 years, you are a US-based researcher. And US-based researchers in a US legal entity will follow the rule of as being a US researcher. Yeah, so Marie Curie, so it's all the so you have the two ways. So the EU-based researchers are eligible because they are in the EU or the associated country. So when I say EU, it's or the associated country like the UK or Switzerland or Norway, etc., or Ukraine. They are all based in those countries, so they are eligible to apply either to a Marie Curie to go to another European or associated member state. They have to be mobile. They cannot apply to stay where they are, or they are eligible to apply for the Marie Curie Global Fellowship, so that's to go out of this EU plus associated country. So they can be from anywhere within the countries that participate in Horizon Europe. And vice versa, it's anyone from all over the world that can apply to go in the EU or those associated countries. I cannot hear you, I think. Yeah, you need a new mic. So it's typically for newer postdoc. We don't want, I mean, we don't encourage more senior researchers to keep going on from postdoc to postdoc. So and the competition is very high, and there is a training element also to that. So you need to demonstrate that it's really for training purpose, that you will learn something new. But those are considerations that are taken into account by the expert evaluators. Yeah, but it's, and again, you can try as first postdoc, but that's sometimes a bit, because the competition is so high, maybe as a second postdoc, that is the most adequate. Yeah, Spanish government. Yeah. So, I mean, we know researchers get their funding from many different sources. So that's, of course, perfectly normal and usual. The only thing that you need to be careful is that there is no double funding for the same activity. So you need to testify, I mean, show that you are working 100% on that project and justify that your time on that project. But we don't allow double funding for the same project. So in general, you follow the rule of the institution where you are. In terms of salary of researchers, it cannot be lower than what the researchers get in the country. For the Marie Curie, we have rates that must be respected. So there, you cannot give them a lower salary than the rates that we give. And then all the other ethical aspects, all our projects that are touching upon those topics like animal testing, human human implication in experiments, etc., have to go through our ethical review. So we have a dedicated body that review all the ethical aspects of that, and they are giving the green light or request further explanation if needed. And I believe the proposal should include, if this is the case, a certificate of good compliance in terms of ethics from the national ethical body. So that's how we do. So the IP and publication. So we don't own. I mean, we don't. The beneficiary of the grant own the IP. Okay. Now, in a consortium, of course, there are multiple players. So that's why we ask, or we recommend the consortium to draft this consortium agreement where they sort out the IP, the intellectual property issues among partners, where they decide which previous know-how they decide to share with the partner of the consortium. And remember, it's a very privileged environment and safe environment. But those are to be discussed among the partners, and we don't intervene in that. And in terms of publication, same, it's typically among the scientists to decide who goes first and when to publish, etc. But we don't intervene in that. So first of all, which country were involved, sorry? Okay, so talk to your European partners, including the UK. They are now well integrated in Horizon Europe. And on one side, so that's the first step. And then the other part of the homework would be to screen the work program. So the current work program 2025, to see if it's going to be cluster 6. Well, it depends, it's climate, so 5 or 6, depending on which aspect, and screen it to see if there is any current call for funding that would fit their needs. And if not, wait for the publication of the work program 26-27. Yes. There on the screen. And again, reach out to the national contact point. So if you have an idea where you want to go, because I guess the conditions for this flexibility will depend on the host. So reach out to the university or the national contact point of the member state where you want to go. They will have had the case, and they will have had decided on how to implement that.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that's much better. So you spoke about opportunities for U.S. researchers to, I forget what the name was, but to not ask for money, but become affiliated. Is that something that can be combined with, say, a fellowship, like a U.S. fellowship, but it provides, in essence, funding for the European partner, but not, so the U.S. researcher will come with, say, a Fulbright or something else,
Absolutely.
but the host institution would be able to apply for funding to run the project and essentially host you, but not pay you.
So The associated partner, this is the case for consortium. So the consortium would be you in CUNY, you create a consortium with 5 other European partners, let's say. Each of you stay in their own university, you stay here. You are not asking for money because it's a cluster 2 project on or 4 or 5. But you have a grant from the NSF to work on this project. You could join with that grant the consortium because you can tell them, look, I have the money to do this type of work from the NSF. Would I fit well in your consortium? And what I would encourage you is if when you win a grant from the NSF, reach out to your European partners saying, look, I have money to do this work. Can I fit in one of your consortium? And they will maybe they're maybe in the process to build a new consortium and then can integrate you with your work.
Thank you.
Is-
Way to leverage your
Yes,
US funding. That can, you know,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
May I? We have other questions. If a U.S. institution has a field office in the EU, can the office based in the EU apply for European funding as a European institution?
Only if, so an office is not enough. It has to be a research performing entity. So we know that a lot of US universities have campus to teach in Europe. We never understood because you are shipping the student and the teachers to a nice location in Europe, but you don't get the really European experience, but that's another story. But that's not enough. You need to have a research performing entity, legal entity in Europe to benefit from that. Northeastern University is opening a lab in Dublin, and I think Arizona State University also are trying to open labs in Europe to do that. But the money will go through the research performing lab or entity in Europe for that.
Is the doctoral network a paid opportunity or it's only like an internship?
So the doctoral network, so it's a network of different institutions that the grant consists of PhD grants, but we are not funding the US partner there, okay? But the European members will receive grants for PhD, and they will be paid salary as PhD fellows, yeah, for 4 years, yeah.
Got it. Thanks.
We have other questions. Can researchers request that their grant proposals be considered by more than one funding call or cluster, like NSF?
So you're typically responding to a specific call for funding under Horizon Europe. Because there are really differentiated programs, so I don't see the case where you could apply to 2 different ones within Horizon Europe because they are well defined. But in any case, you are free to apply to as many you want. There is a limitation for the European Research Research Council grant where you cannot apply the year after. If you fail, you have to wait 2 years. But otherwise, you're welcome to apply to any possible grants, but you may not win 2 grants for the same project. Again, no double funding.
We do have, yeah. In the case of research calls under clusters that appear in pillar 2 of your slide, How flexible is the review process for interdisciplinary proposals that may bridge different scientific domains? In other words, do projects that are by nature interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary take into account the wider range of research traditions that may be standard in different scientific domains?
Absolutely. So this is really the nature of those consortiums. So transdisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity I highly encourage. It will, of course, all depend on the wording of this call for funding, what is the scope, but typically they are not so prescriptive. So there is a great freedom from the applicants to come with original solutions to a specific problem. And of course, yeah, the idea of having a consortium is to bring different field of science together to resolve a specific problem.
We have one last question. Sure. If a US scholar has European partners in a consortium, can the US partner lead the proposal submission to Horizon Europe call?
No, it has to be either a European or, so in terms of leading is being the coordinator. So no, it has to be a European member state or associated country.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, can you just, I think some of the answers to some questions were on the examples of CUNY researchers who currently hold Horizon grants. So one of them was an interdisciplinary that had like multiple areas. One was food and agriculture. It was a mental health project.
I think this. Yeah, this.
Yeah, I
one.
think this one.
Yeah.
Can you point out where Fields of Science?
Yeah. So this is a screenshot.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, we have to read it through.
Oh, it says on the right panel, it
Yeah.
says funded under.
So this is funded under Cluster 6. You see here?
Okay.
Yeah. And it's ongoing. It's just started. And it has, yes, it's transdisciplinary, including climate aspects, sustainability, health communities, climate resilience, etc. Yeah. So this is a good example.
Thank you.
Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah. Right.
Hello. Could you talk a little bit about public-private partnerships? An example would be working with a technologist or a technology scientist that might be at a private company as opposed to a university or a research organization. I understand that they cannot be PIs, according to what I've read about this online, but they might be able to be partners to a research project. Can you just talk a little bit about that and any
Absolutely.
successful examples?
So all our grants are open for any research performing entity. So that includes the private sector. So we highly encourage private companies in our consortium, especially when we are looking at solutions where there can be transfer of knowledge towards the private sector. So this is highly encouraged. For the Marie Curie, those can be hosted also by private companies. Doctoral networks, there is possibility for an agreement to have industrial doctorates also. And all the pillar 2, indeed, we want to see private companies involved in the research. We want to encourage this link between the private and the public. Typically, we won't see that many startups because it's the cycle is probably a bit too long. We try to have the grants within 7 months. So that's still too long for startups and probably too heavy. But for startups, we have the European Innovation Council that is fully for private companies to benefit. The European Innovation Council, so those are SBIR grants, but So anyone can apply, but if you win it, you need to relocate to Europe to benefit from it. But there are some startups who have already a EU activity or a link, so that works too. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you. Was it good?
You've been so helpful to us over the years here at CUNY. Look forward to continuing our collaboration. You have a tenure here in the United States?
One more year, yeah.
One more year.
11 months.
Okay, so we have the advantage of having you at least one more year. Thank you.
you.
Thank you so
Thanks for
much.
being here.
So.
I'll take a picture of you guys. You can take a picture. I'll do a LinkedIn post, so it's you're all okay with being on LinkedIn, yes? You take a picture with me, and then we
Sure. Thank you. So I'd like to move on to our next presenter, who will be presenting virtually, and she is actually an EU grantee. Her name is Dr. Deborah Balk. She's a professor of public affairs at the Marx School of Public and International Affairs at Baruch College. She's also at the Graduate Center in Sociology, Economics Programs, and the School of Public Health at the
On the mic,
City
she's
University
hearing
of New York. She's the director of the CUNY Institute for Demographic Research, from which she co-directs the Virtual Center for Aging, Climate, and Health, an expert on population, climate, interactions. She recently completed her service as co-chair of the New York City Panel on Climate Change. Climate Change's fourth assessment, and was a member of the Society and Economy Working Group of New York State Climate Impact Assessment. Until recently canceled by executive order, she served as member of the Health Chapter for the U.S. For the 6th U.S. National Climate Assessment. She's also been a member of the U.S. Census Bureau Scientific Advisory Committee, which now continues as an independent body with support from the Census Project, and a member of the National Academy of Sciences Committee on Population. She got her PhD in demography from the University of California, Berkeley, and she's got a master's in public policy from the University of Michigan. So are we going to Beamer, how to get her on?
Thank you for that introduction, John. I'm here if you can all hear me. And I think I'm sharing my screen. I hope I'm sharing my screen.
Yes, you're sharing your screen.
Okay, great. So I really appreciated Dr. Bernard's very thorough introduction. I'm going to add a little bit to it from the perspective of a researcher who has received funding. But I'm going to start with a little bit of a kind of a conceptual overview of the project. Then I'll turn to some of the mechanics of the grant and how we came to be the fortunate recipients of it. And then I'll go back to some of the substance. So for those of you who are still in the meeting and want to stick around for sure to hear, who aren't so interested in this particular topic, stick around at least for like the first half of my remarks, because I will, stay the whole time, of course, but up through halfway, I'll get very into some of the nitty gritty. So this is a project on projecting our urban future and using a blended approach that takes into account spatial demography for understanding it. The motivation for it is that there are a lot of uncertainties. In these uncertain times, we have a lot of certainty. So we know, for example, that the population of the world is going to age. And it's underway. Aging is underway, most notably in Europe and East Asia, but also in the US, Latin America, and even in Africa. So, and then, of course, much of the world's population still lives in rural areas, but the majority of the population lives in cities and towns, and the future of population growth will take place almost certainly almost exclusively in those cities and towns. So understanding urbanization, future urbanization is really important in societies with aging. There's some question about de-urbanization or transforming the form of urbanization. So these are all some issues that are relevant. And put these in the context of climate change, we expect a hotter, in most places, future, one with much more variability in weather, more flood prone, stormier, also drier. And so overlaying these two are really important for understanding who's at risk, what the impacts of climate might be, and also strategies for mitigation, as well as adaptation, of course. And so but just to note that demography is in a social science silo, climate is in a earth and environmental and physical science silo, and the tools and data that we use come from those silos. So in demography, we use demographic data comes from surveys and censuses, vital events records, and other administrative data. They're either individual records or they're aggregated, and very frequently they are not spatial in any way other than a national unit. National unit. Climate data and climate change data are point source observations. Sometimes they're modeled output in a grid format, and in fact in a raster if it's spatial, whereas the demographic data would be in a table or a vector format if it's produced in a spatial layer. The climate data is almost always spatialized, and sometimes it's either very coarse, as in climate futures, those climate future models, or very local. And neither one of those is typically a great match for the demographic data collections that we have. So the work that the funded project we have built on this foundation of many global grids of population, some of which have started here in the US with funding from NASA at Columbia University on the grid of population of the world. Recently also having been defunded, but also there are global initiatives. There are other US initiatives in like the Department of Defense funds, largely Landscan, another project, and Department of Energy. And then the World Pop Project has received a lot of funding from Gates Foundation and European entities. And then the most recent kid on the block is the JRC, the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. And those are our core partners in this work. But there has been a community of people, it's now known as the PopGrid community, creating these global grids of population. And then into that mix comes along global grids of settlements. And despite the long arc of work from in Landsat in satellite Earth observation satellites through the Landsat program from the mid-70s, the culmination of these data sets into a settlement model was really championed by the European Commission, again, through the Joint Research Center. And so, and by combining the Landsat archive with newer and more detailed Sentinel data, which is a European satellite. So, however, there's no spatial model for population forecasting beyond like the next 10 years, and there's no spatial model for city growth or urban share estimation. And since most of the population growth is going to take place in those cities and towns, it's important to understand both how settlements increase vertically and horizontally. And city growth in particular is driven by fertility and migration, and our statistics are not collected at scales easily compatible with forecasting of cities. So, and migration's the hardest piece, and I'm not going to talk very much about it in this context, though happy to answer any questions. So, also important to understand that urbanization influences occur at a variety of scales over different time periods, necessitating a multi-level model. And in the circle, we see like the simplest form, but the one that has dominated for well over 50 years, more like 100 years, that we have urban and rural people. Everybody's either, you fit into, it's a simple dichotomy. Much more realistic representation is something like that oval one where there are, it's a connection, an urban space that includes large cities or urban centers and peripheral areas, suburban areas and exurban areas, and small towns that are closely connected to those large cities and may get a lot of services from those cities, may share an eco-shed with those cities, and so on. And so, as well as the rural areas are not always, most of those areas are unpopulated, but there are villages and towns in those places, and they may differ too. We also know at the same time that as cities grow, they tend to as cities are larger, as they become larger, they grow more slowly. So that's like a characteristic that we can leverage. But we also know that we need to couple this kind of these realities into like a common suite of constraints and processes that influence urban and built up or land and population change. And so that's sort of the premise under which this work takes place. So I'm showing here this built up, a model of built up on the leftmost image, and that's built up from the Sentinel-2. It's Sentinel-2 showing just the Sentinel-2 built up. Then it's combined with a population surface, and people are relocated through an algorithm to put people where there is built up. And so we see, and so that's a pink, the more pink it is, the more densely populated it is. And it uses the Sentinel data to reallocate.
Deborah, I want to interrupt you for a second.
Yes.
Can you share your full screen on the PowerPoint? We're kind of getting a double screen here.
You're getting a double screen?
Well, we're
sure.
kind of getting your
The screen.
yeah.
Oh, are you not getting? Let me
No.
reshare. Let me share again. I should
Share,
be.
yeah.
Just
no
your
problem.
PowerPoint, not your
Yeah, no,
entire
that's what I thought I was sharing. With apologies. Sorry. How
We're
about
good
now?
We're
Okay,
good.
sorry.
We're good. Thanks.
Sorry about that. I thought that's what I was sharing. Okay, so you see Sentinel large now on the, and then that Sentinel data, the population data are reallocated from the gridded population of the world, the product produced by the CDEC, the NASA funded project, which is the longest of them and has estimates of population back into 1990 and earlier. And so that's reallocated to these settled places that produces this what's called the GHS POP, Global Human Settlement Population Distribution. And finally, then it is reallocated into a dichotomy, into not a dichotomy, but a degree of urbanization into 7 classes of urban areas. And so, and those can be collapsed into 3, which is an improvement, 50% improvement from urban and rural. It's urban, rural, and it's like urban, rural, and then something in between. And so the 7 classes do much better, are more obviously discriminating between types of spaces, but in some statistical reporting, it's a lot easier and more robust to use just the 3. But I just want to point out that 3 is more than 2, and particularly because in other research that led into the work that we're doing, we found that in the urban centers are pretty easy to do a good job of in the estimation and rural and sparsely settled areas similarly, but the stuff in between is really hard to classify and draw the implications out for a whole suite of things, for health, for climate adaptation, you name it. So, and this degree of urbanization is a data product produced by the European, again, by JRC. And so we have a partnership with JRC that helps to produce the inputs to that so that we can forecast that going into the future. So I have, there are some steps in the projection because population and built up areas, we project them in a semi-independent manner. And the projections include subnational variation in all country except for very small countries. And the population data population alone are always subnational, but they vary to the degree. But we want to go beyond just population counts, but to address the demographic features that we know influence population growth, such as fertility or its proxy. And I'll discuss that in a minute. And then the projection parameters by the model at each scale can be correlated with national level of demographic change to determine empirical linkages. And I've taken out slides, but this is an effort to get to population projections out to 2100. So, the community of scholarship around this has, for many years, decades, I've been engaged without funding with colleagues at the JRC, and they've been producing data sets, and we were producing data sets and analysis that were very complementary. And so prior to the current project, we had a small project that was sort of to get our feet wet a little bit. And then there was a call for a project to help the European Commission produce a global projection of population by degree of urbanization. And we applied for it and we got it. So we are not the only people in the who like do this, but like we were partly because we had been closely a member of the, you know, a common community. We had a good sense of how to potentially address the call. So our collaboration is us at the CUNY Institute for Demographic Research, the SUNY Stony Brook, previously colleagues at the Population Council, and the University of Colorado Boulder. And we work very closely with the European Commission's Joint Research Center. And I just want to point out that before going forward, that this topic area is one that the Europeans care about more than the US federal agencies. Or the US cares a lot of, I mean, the health implications very clear with NIH, and we had some early work laying some of the groundwork for city growth and its implications for health many, many years ago from the NIH, but this has not been like an NIH priority. And it's also similarly, it wasn't so much an NSF priority, but the Europeans are really interested in urbanization and as well of the demographic features of aging and its impact on urbanization, and furthermore, placing the urban future in the context of climate change. This work doesn't actually go into the climate change piece. It's not, that wasn't part of the call, but knowing that it could do that is, I think, an important leverage point. So for those of you wondering, you know, you just want, it's partly being at the right place at the right time. And knowing, you know, so and another way of saying this is that, you know, we're super grateful for the European Commission for funding this work, because I don't think it would have had funding in the US, not with this like degree of commitment. So the project team and partners I'd mentioned previously, here are my names of my colleagues. This is like the core project team members. It includes Alessandra Carioli, who is at the JRC, and another colleague who's now with the World Pop Project at Southampton, as well as colleagues at Colorado and SUNY Stony Brook and myself. We have a student team leader and a project coordinator who's now at JRC. Previously, he was at the Belgian headquarters of the European Commission. And within the JRC alone, we work closely with 2 units there, both their disaster risk management and their demography, migration, and governance units. So we have regular meetings and so on. So it really is a deep partnership. We work with colleagues at the United Nations, as CESN at Columbia University, and some additional partners who are specializing in migration from around the world. I won't spend much time on this, but just to say this opportunity has given us at CUNY a lot of and at Columbia and Colorado, we've been able to hire quite a number of students, and they've been they've learned about a major research project. This is a 4-year research project. It's a lot. We've had computing support in-house from our technical director, the director of computing at CIDR, so CUNY Institute for Demographic Research. All of this is to say is that this provides, this has been a great opportunity, not just for the PIs, but for students as well. Here's a few administrative considerations that I want to discuss before sort of going back to the research in general. And this builds, I put this slide together while Dr. Bernard was speaking, because I thought that this was, you know, these are a few points that I think I can add, which is that the institutional overheads, which CUNY may care, your campus may care about, they differ. In my particular grant, it was 7%. And I don't know if that's the norm across all of the European funding opportunity, you know, European Commission funding opportunities. But in CUNY standards, that's pretty low, and sometimes it requires that you engage closely with your provosts and sponsored projects offices early on to make sure that you can seek such funding. Similarly, we have a cost sharing requirement in this grant. And we get that support from our computing director because he supports this. But again, cost sharing is something that CUNY does, I would say, a little differently than a lot of private Ivy League type institutions. And so again, that's something, if you're thinking about applying for one of these awards, and should these sort of, you know, these 2 issues be relevant to you, you want to get on that early on. you might also note that currencies fluctuate and you can't do anything about it. So like when we applied for the award, the euro was less strong to the dollar than it was later. So we actually, I think I've said that right. Anyhow, we in real terms, we received less money than we budgeted for, and we just had to, deal with that. So that's a property of applying for a grant in another where it's specified in a currency other than the one that we use in the US. And lastly, the legal environments differ between the US and Europe. So I recommend people leave more time for contractual review. So don't plan on spending any money. You can work on your research in your spare time and free time as you want, but you won't be able to commit to hiring people or traveling on that money until it passes contractual review. And that takes longer because the legal environments between the US and the European Commission are different. So, as you might expect. And as I pointed out in just demonstrating some of the collaborations that this is built on, they don't usually material overnight. And in my experience, they work best when they're really substantively grounded. And so I would say reach out early for people who you'd like to work with if you don't have somebody you're already working with that might make it a more attractive submission. So those are my few specific add-ons. And then I'm going to discuss a little, I'm going to go back to some of the substantive just description of this program of research. It said we're trying to produce a degree of the ingredients for the degree of urbanization so we can forecast that out to the end of the century, consistent with long-term forecasts that are done for population and go into, say, climate projections. So we want to get built-up grids out to 2100 and population grids out to 2100s. And then those two things, just like in that 3 image, can then be combined to create a degree of urbanization. And those degrees of urbanization can then replace urban-rural classes that are used typically in a lot of statistical reporting, such as by the UN or the World Bank or other kinds of things. So that is the genesis of this work. There are many equations that underline it. Just 2 here they're not very dissimilar, but we're predicting growth in built-up proportions and growth in population density. And these have a bunch of, this is built, this is population, and these are cell-specific factors. These are gravity-like influences in neighborhoods, and they're often constraint-based. I'll discuss those in a minute. And this is the demographic features. And the demographic part is really what's missing. The other aspects have been understood to be part of this system by most people who are already producing these grids. So this is a schematic version of similarly. And again, I'm going to talk about these fixed locational factors in a minute. But most of what I want to present in the rest of this is an understanding of the demography and how it contributes, say, to built-up growth. So more equations, but if in the interest of time, I can come back to them. But importantly, again, these cell-specific things that influence, like the built-up thing at that level, we expect them to be mostly influenced by invariant factors such as elevation, slope, and the initial built-up grid and the degree of urbanization. The neighborhood characteristics include how distant you are from the next place, for example, or maybe how far one is from a water body. And then finally, the regional characteristics are demographic characteristics. One would expect fertility to play an influence. Fertility is, believe it or not available and not so easy to measure at the subnational level, which would be the relevant unit across the world. And therefore, we use a child-woman ratio proxy, which I'll show in a minute. So we did test cases with these 5 countries. And so you'll see these countries in maps and such in the future, but it's Kenya, Peru, South Korea, Spain, and Vietnam. And you can see between 1970 and 2020, they vary to the degree to which they were, urban, the fraction of the population that was urban early, in the earliest period and in the latest period, huge variation across these countries, as well as in their fertility rates. And so here are the specifications for those of you who don't know what built up looks like. And this is Kenya. This is change over time. And here's South Korea. So also change over time. And if you were to look at the average built up grid by the subnational units, you could see it in these sort of basically these plots that show the average and variation within the subnational units. And so you can see both variation within units, between the units and over time. So as I mentioned, we have time invariant things. We consider that elevation, slope, aridity, and whether a place is an island. Permanent water is masked out from the beginning, and rivers we also consider distance to river. We also include whether a place is a coastal zone or a port. Those are attractive, things that tend to attract, as well as roads, which we experimented with very early on, but we don't have a global database, a time varying global database of roads. So we consider, but we did some experimentation with that. We used only publicly available data sets, again, many from also from other European sources like the Copernicus mission, and those are the sources there. So now on to the specifications of the demographic indicators. So you probably have all seen a population pyramid in the past. This is what it looked like for Kenya, very triangularly shaped in around 1970, and this is what it looks like in 15 years ago now. For a country like South Korea, it would probably look like a rectangle, a straight out rectangle now, or an inverted rectangle where there are fewer young people than there are old people, for example. And what's important is this is compiled from many different data sources, and we're collecting age and sex. So you have sex and age, that's ages along the y-axis. We're doing it from 1975 to the present, and we're doing it for subnational level. And why do we go back that far? Because going back that far gives us a rich history for which to project into the future. We ask, can we expect child-woman ratios to predict? Child-woman ratio is the number of children under age 5 to women ages 15 to 49. And so that is available, that is derived directly from this, and this is available for every country in the world. At least one point in time, and as you'll see, for most countries, multiple points in time. They are not, however, available with all the same data sets, and so I'll come to that in a second. But very briefly, we ask, can we expect child-woman ratios to predict population growth? And this is an example that definitely says yes. So our example that fits really high. And is it a good proxy for fertility? Similar looking graph, yes, very high fit. There's a lot of variation even at the national level over time within the 5 countries we used to do the experiment with. So that was important. And the UN forecasted 2100 show a lot of variation as well. These are derived from their age sex structures. And then we also see a lot of subnational variation. So here we have, this is a map of South Korea changing over time from very high levels of child-woman ratios to very low levels now. Korea has experienced one of the fastest aging trajectories of all countries. So we can see, again, here we see child-woman ratios over time, both the variation within subnational units as well as a much more flattening out of the entire country in the most recent period. This is now switching to Kenya, just showing within subnational, every dot here is a different subnational unit. If we were to use national data, we would just be taking this average, but in fact, there's wide variation in these ratios within subnational units. So we assign, and finally, and this is also one of the things that is a product, instead of showing the administrative units from which these data come from, we assign the child-woman ratio to the pixels using the global human settlement layer, the built-up data set. So so that allows us, so this shows child-woman ratio rather than in the units that we saw in this map here. The projection is different, with apologies to the geographers in the room. It takes away the unpopulated areas so that and we can see big changes over this 50-year period. So the thing is that the demographic data don't come from one source, and this is a research question, and it's really important to understand that they differ quite a bit. So we have survey data. Surveys tend to produce really great information on age structure, but not necessarily population counts of the whole country or certain of the subnational units in the country. Census counts or estimates come from other data sources, and then national statistical offices produce. Now, if lots of good data countries have excellent national statistical office data, sometimes they come from vital registration, sometimes from censuses. rarely from surveys, but surveys have really been an important filler where demographic accounting at the national level has been weak through national statistical offices. So I want to be mindful of the time. So I'm just going to like flip through this. This is just gives you an example of what's going on in Africa. And so for every point here where there's a letter, the letter indicates the type of data collection. And so a blue is a kind of survey, a red line is a kind of is microdata based on the census unit, for example. So and so you can see we have a long time span, but we have multiple sources, and it's important to understand the implications of the multiple sources, and importantly, analysis that allows us to detect and describe undercounts, which are really common in many of these data sources. The young tend to be undercounted, and age tends to be misrepresented in all sources, actually, among the oldest group. So, and the subnational patterns, there is a subnational pattern, but also we have to be attuned to biases that might be exacerbated by the subnational nature of the data and related to the correlates. So part of this project is to put all those age structures in place and to have a spatial model. This is, again, I'm just going to show you that we experimented with many statistical models. We evaluated a suite of responses, and we considered the role of explanatory factors, whether or not the model allows for direct identification. I'm not going to have time to do this, but I'm just going to read you the words, which are lesson 1, not all spatial models are created equally. You can see there are 2 models of Spain. There's both areas of over prediction and under prediction from different models, 2 different models than the first 2 showed. There may be agreement across models, and that agreement, in fact, might correlate closely with whether it's an urban area, high agreement in 3 models, but very poor, but not such agreement with one particular model based on urban and rural areas. Again, this shows Vietnam. So finally, so that's the spatial component side of doing the projection, picking a model that can be replicated globally or a suite of models. And finally, putting child-woman ratio into that statistical model. This is a theoretical basis that lets us establish that the child-woman ratio and built-up levels change over time, importantly. And so this is just, we don't do it at this level, it just allows some of the empirical evidence to be built. But we put it in a regression with all those other factors I mentioned early on, elevation, aridity, whether it's an island and close to a river and so on. And we added distance to major roads, as well as, does child-woman ratio predict built up? Yes, child-woman ratio in period T, and here in this example, it's Kenya, predicts built up in a later period, and the higher the child-woman ratio, this fertility proxy, the greater built up proxy. The regression also accounts for all these fixed factors that may encourage or impede growth, controlling for the initial built up period at the start of the period. The factors that impede growth conform with, they confirm our prior expectations, being a protected area, being at high elevation, and being far from a major road impedes growth. Factors that foster growth are aridity, which is itself skewed. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Being near a port and nearness to rivers fosters growth. And so those are the kinds of things that we see, we get out of this regression estimate. So I'm going to wrap up now, but let me just, so this was a really ambitious project with experienced interdisciplinary teams collaborating on the science and the data production. It builds on improvements in both remote sensing data and better population data, and talking about how we can improve them further. It promotes a recently endorsed harmonized definition, the degree of urbanization produced from the JRC at the European Commission, and moves away from a simple urban-rural dichotomy. And it produces this publicly available long time series on age structure. And this has, myriad applications, including the intended urbanization projections that are demographically informed, but also ranging from disaster response to climate projections and many, many others. So stay tuned. The publicly available data products will be coming both in vector and raster format forthcoming. There'll be related documentation and papers and degree of urbanization applications and statistical reporting, such as the UN. And I think moving away from this urban-rural dichotomy is really, an important innovation for the 21st century. So that's it. Thanks for having me. And I'm happy to take a question if there is one.
Thanks, Deborah. Any questions from the audience? Yes.
Oh, I can't hear.
Thank you.
So
Can you hear me now?
yes.
Okay. Thank you for presenting your results and for sharing your experiences getting this grant opportunity. I'm curious, as we saw in the first half from Dr. Bernard, a presentation about which types of proposals commonly were or weren't eligible to, US institutions were eligible to get European Commission money for. This seemed like an opportunity that was in that second pillar of collaborative research, and that there are typically, these are collaborative research projects that US institutions are not eligible for unless it's health or there was an explicit call for US participation, or if you could make an exceptional case for US involvement where, since we're not normally consortium member, can I ask which one of those three this was?
So sure, you know, you can ask, and I can unfortunately can't even tell you that I know the answer. Because I think things have changed quite a bit in the last you know, few years, and I believe this was unrestricted. So like anybody in the world could have applied for this. The fact that we had a strong collaboration with the JRC, I'm sure was very important to actually getting the award. So, and I have, just to be, I didn't mention these others, but I have participated in many in other funding things, and they've always included European collaborators. So,
And maybe I could get feedback from Dr. Bernard about whether that type of collaboration with a funded US partner is still possible, or whether it depends on the collector.
Yes. I would need to see which call Dr. Ball applied to. It may be so also because I see the involvement of the Joint Research Center. So the Joint Research Center are our national lab or European labs, if you want. So it may be an actual funding from the Joint Research Center for which they have more flexibility to have studies with other partners in the world, which would not fall into what I presented.
Okay.
But I don't have that information, so I don't know, because I looked at the grant agreement. It looked unfamiliar to me as the typology. So it may be so that it's just a particular case of our European labs reaching out to partners for a specific study. Because, for example, the Joint Research Center would publish the Atlas of Soils. It's an analysis of all the soils all the world. So they would have funding to reach out to other partners in the world to make studies that would feed into their project. But those are very specific cases. Those are not the mainstream grants in that case.
Thank you.
So, sorry about the confusion.
Would the applications be viewed as more competitive if the collaborations already had a history together, that these were not de novo collaborations, but in fact that the different partners had published together, had already successfully completed projects together, as opposed to a de novo arrangement?
So there is no,
Not in terms of the requirement, but in terms of the review, where they
the
would be
reviewer.
more likely to be funded.
So there is no privilege given to those who have already benefited from funding in the past as a consortium. So that's an important element. Now the evaluator will look into the solidity and the coherence of the consortium. So they may consider that this consortium has worked together before with efficient results. They may take into account this aspect. But having benefited from a grant before does not give you any privilege. You always have to make a case why your new project is worth a grant.
right. I'd like to add to that, which in our experience, we had this small grant beforehand. It was very limited. And that, I don't think that was the reason we were sort of like, the next step was possible. It was just timing, and there was an interest to get some work done previously. The grant the work I just presented was it was I don't know, it might have been 100 pages. It was a long, it was a big production, and it was something, I mean, for people in the room, it was €500,000. It was a 4-year project. I mean, it was a substantial undertaking. As you can see, it has these many different elements, and it's interdisciplinary. I wouldn't have, the team had, parts of the team had previously published together, like my core team was, we had worked together, and we brought something new to this interdisciplinary team, or we brought a different dimension to this new interdisciplinary team. But the reason I mentioned the earlier work and the participation in these like larger global scientific communities is that it allowed us to understand sort of our complementarities really, really well before applying. And I think that's really important, because it's not, because we knew what we could add to one another. So it wasn't like we had lots of papers together beforehand, like the entire group, not at all. But we knew where each group would bring strength to the proposal, and that without it, the work wouldn't happen. So that's, so I do think that the engagement, these kinds of scientific engagements in these like naturally occurring communities is really valuable. So I don't know how to put it any other way. And now that a lot of them are online, it's not even all that hard. You don't have to commit a week of your time to a trip here and there. You can learn about each other's research by attending webinars and seminars, just like this. So I'm sorry I'm not there in person today. I really wanted to be. I had a prior commitment that I couldn't make, with apologies.
Yeah. Okay, there was one question that came in before that we did not answer. We wanted to ask Dr. Bernard to address it, and it said, "Great talk. Regarding public-private partnerships in the EU, how do your contacts ensure profits and intellectual property rights are shared with the public to avoid what has happened in the US, where taxpayer dollars fund research that is harnessed by big tech and pharma with pricing that is not accessible to the public that supplied the data and the initial funding? In other words, with less regulation in tech than pharma, how is the EU mitigating exploitative private interests?"
So John, I see on your program that the event stops at 12:15, so we're already past time. So I'm sorry. Can't answer that question. Okay, so this has nothing to do with research. This is a question of your health system. The logic of public funded research is to fill in the market failure that the private sector will not invest in fundamental research. And that's why the public is funding it, in order to have return later on from available products that fill into a competitive market. And the public research is made public to any actors to benefit from it. So it's up to the different companies to compete and have available products. So that is a system that we have always worked with, and we continue to work. Now the specificities of the US health system, you probably need to have an internal discussion on that. I cannot really comment, because there are so many differences and so many different actors, and the ratio of GDP that the US is investing in health is twice as or 4 times as more as what we do in Europe, because it's fully private and we are mostly public. But this has nothing to do with the research ecosystem. So we work through what we've always worked through. So the public authorities have decided to fund that with a legal environment that allows you to fill in for intellectual property and to benefit from the return on this IP if you have invented something. But I think the question that is being asked here is really beyond the research ecosystem. It's a specificity of the US health system.
Comment. Public-private partnership is different in every country. And that questioner probably is commenting, maybe we've gone a little bit too far here. And that maybe we've gone a little bit too far here, and maybe we should reconsider the relationship that we have. But inherent in our system is this relationship that research, and especially basic research, is publicly funded. Without public funding for basic research, there's a lot of basic research that probably would not even occur. So a healthy system invests in basic research. That's why it's in today's budget climate, when I start looking at the budgets and the federal government is zeroing out basic research, it's like shooting yourself in the foot. Even researchers who I've talked to who do applied and development research, even Defense Department researchers recognize that without basic research, we would be nowhere. So it's important to understand the importance of especially basic research more than anything else. Anyway, I think, thank you very much, Dr. Bernard, for joining us. It was my pleasure hosting you. I look forward to working with you. As you can see, we have researchers here who are very, very interested in what Europe is doing with respect to funding. We've worked together over the years. Europe and the US has worked together over the years. We have helped you when you were in trouble. You're now helping us now that we're kind of in trouble. I hope not. But we look forward to continuing that very, very strong relationship that we have had with each other. Let me thank the rest of you for joining us here today. Deborah, your talk was very interesting. There's no doubt that there's some really high-level research that's being funded by the EU and being supported by CUNY as well. So thank you for your presentation. I'm sure that we'll be working together to try to find some more funding from the EU. There's no doubt that what you do is of great interest, not only here in this country, but also would be of great interest to the EU as well. Those of you who are interested in projects with the EU, you can contact me. I'm available here at CUNY to provide you with that kind of support. And finally, let me just thank my colleague Ingrid, who's been so helpful in organizing this whole thing,